You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 593, Q2.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Norman Lau.
And I'm John Champion. Each week on Mission Log, we learn everything we can about humanity by examining an episode of Star Trek, looking for the morals, meanings, and messages, and asking if the whole thing stands the test of an eternity, either as a human or as an amoeba.
This week, Q2, the one where Q shows up, but he's got a surprise. Q, or rather a younger Q, and it's up to Aunt Kathy to try and raise the boy right.
I'll be back with trivia in a moment, but first, here's Norman to tell all of you how to reach us.
We'd love to hear from you. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Find us on Facebook at Mission Log Pod and on Instagram and Threads at Roddenberry Podcasts. The conversation always continues in the Mission Log Discord with near-daily live events and 24/7 chat about the topics you love. Get your invitation to our private server by joining patreon.com/missionlog. While you're at it, one of the most important ways to help your favorite podcasts is to leave a 5-star rating and a review at Apple or your preferred podcast platform. And remember, your comments could be used on the show. And now, here's John Champion with this week's trivia. This week's trivia. This week's trivia.
Nicely done. All right, Q2, we have a story by Kenneth Miller, and you may not be surprised at all to learn that Ken pitched this story back in Season 4, because, of course, we had The Q and the Gray in Season 3 with a teleplay that Ken had written, so why wouldn't he want to write a sequel to his own story? Now, this time around, the teleplay duties would go to Robert Doherty, who we just discussed for his teleplay and story credit on Repentance. And it was directed by, drumroll please, LeVar Burton. And, of course, a man who needs no introduction. The previous episode of his that we discussed was Nightingale. Now let's meet our guest stars. Welcome back, of course, to John Delancey, making his final appearance as Q in Voyager. And he won't be back in the role for another couple of decades almost, on screen anyway. A fun fact, in 2000, he and author Peter David co-wrote a Trek novel called IQ, which gets a different context in this episode. Lorna Raver plays the main Q judge, who we meet at the end of the episode. Her long career started in live theater, and she easily transitioned to TV and film in the early 90s. Lorna left quite an impression in Sam Raimi's 2009 horror film Drag Me to Hell, a role that got her multiple genre award nominations and a win from the Fangoria Chainsaw Awards. This is her only Trek appearance, and we lost Lorna just recently in May of 2025. The Chokugan commander is played by Michael Kagan, and he has turned up in a few other genre shows like Babylon 5, Time Cop, and Lois and Clark, and he's also an accomplished stage actor, and most of his on-screen credits occur between the mid-90s and up to 2019. This is also his only Trek credit thus far. We briefly meet some Alpha Quadrant aliens in the holodeck. The Bolian is played by Scott Davidson, and here he is making his professional on-screen debut. Only a handful of credits followed, with his last being a short film, The Bicycle, in 2013. The Nausicaan is played by Anthony Holliday, an actor who we just saw as a Kazon a few episodes ago in Shattered. And these Trek appearances were relatively early in his career, and you can catch Anthony more recently in appearances on SWAT, Weird City, and Maggie. There's also a Cardassian in there played by multiple uncredited Trek background actor, Michael Balius. Finally, the adolescent Q was played by real-life adolescent at the time, Keegan Delancey. And yes, he is the son of John Delancey in real life, but like any actor, he had to go through the same auditions to land this role on Star Trek. His appearance here is actually at the end of his on-screen professional credits, but there's a lot of creativity in his other work. Keegan has provided vocals on film soundtracks. He has performed multiple times with the LA Opera in several productions. That's all in addition to doing stand-up comedy, and later he decided to switch gears entirely, studying Arabic literature as well as peace, war, and defense studies. He currently works for the U.S. Department of State as a Foreign Service officer. I guess those holodeck lessons in diplomacy paid off.
Welcome to the Delta Quadrant. First there was Bride of Q, now there's Son of Q.
Prologue. In the captain's ready room, Icheb is giving Janeway a full dissertation on early Starfleet history, emphasis on the TOS era, specifically James Kirk's 5-year mission. Icheb was assigned 20 minutes, but he's got a lot of footnotes. Janeway passes him and sends him on his way, only to find someone new in her office, a teenage boy in a Starfleet command uniform, acting like he owns the place. He doesn't, of course, but his dad kinda does. It's Q's son, Q the younger, Q for short, Junior, if you will. Act 1. Q has a parenting problem, so naturally he dumps it on Janeway. His son, the overpowered, under-supervised Junior, has been sent to Voyager for a little human immersion therapy. Q leaves as quickly as he arrived, and Junior responds to Janeway's rules by disappearing in a flash, making it clear that he answers to no one. Charming. Junior reappears on the bridge, bored out of his mind. He wants action, Omega Particle, Species 8472. Janeway declines, so Junior throws himself a warp core rave in engineering. B'Elanna's worried the light show might trigger a breach, but Junior is full of "you're not my real mom" energy and boots the senior staff into the hallway with a snap. They agree that ignoring him might be the best strategy, on the assumption that even omnipotent teens eventually get bored. That theory gets tested immediately. Junior snaps Seven's uniform off in the cargo bay and gets zero reaction. She simply keeps working. Message received. But not all interactions go this way. When Janeway finally gets to the mess hall, even the replicator has an attitude. Neelix volunteers to mentor the kid and is greeted as a kitchen rat in Astrometrics, where Junior is staging space battles. When Neelix dares to suggest that he uses powers to help feed a starving planet, the kid fuses his jaw shut and deletes his vocal cords, so not receptive to feedback. By the time Neelix is in sickbay, Junior has taken over the bridge and summoned Janeway. 3 Borg cubes appear on the view screen. Junior wants to see how humans handle pressure. Act 2. Just as Janeway is about to be assimilated, the Borg vanish, and in pops Q to clean up the mess. Neelix has his voice again, Seven has her dignity, and Janeway has had enough. She demands Q take his son off the ship, but Q pulls her aside for a little exposition. Junior was supposed to be the Continuum's next step forward. Peace, compassion, maybe even a little humility. Instead, he's basically weaponized puberty. Now the Continuum holds Q accountable, and this whole Voyager exchange program is his court-ordered attempt at behavioral reform. Janeway suggests something radical. Parenting. Instead of dumping the problem on a Starfleet ship, Q should try being a father. He finds the idea brilliant, gives her an unsolicited kiss, and disappears. 10 minutes later, her time, Q shows up again, this time in Janeway's bathtub, complaining that the parenting plan didn't work. He and Junior spent years together, Q time, and Junior now refuses to be seen with him. Also, he moved tectonic plates on Bozell Prime just to win an argument. Janeway reframes the issue as one of consequences. Q appears to consider this deeply. Right before he tries to kiss her again, her foot gets in his face instead, and he vanishes, inspired. Back in sickbay, Q drops off his son, freshly restored from amoeba form, and lays down the new law. Junior has 1 week to become a respectable citizen, or he's back to life in the petri dish. Oh, and he no longer has his powers. Junior is not thrilled. Janeway reminds Q that he was supposed to stick around and help, but Q pieces out again, leaving Cunyer to sulk his way toward escape. Janeway has security intercept him. Now officially mortal and grounded, Cunyer is introduced to his new schedule, a curriculum full of things like spatial causality, diplomacy, and dealing with Neelix. His teachers are Seven, Chakotay, and briefly Icheb, who offers to help him with homework. Cunyer naturally plagiarizes him. He also reprograms Chakotay's diplomatic sim to make the other side more agreeable. Turns out that when you've had infinite power since birth, playing fair isn't in the toolkit. Janeway confronts him over the essay scam. Unimpressed by his attempts to pass off Icheb's work as his own, he worries about getting turned back into an amoeba, but she cuts through the theatrics. If he's actually willing to try sincerely, she'll help. But the clock is ticking, and Aunt Kathy's patience is wearing thin. Act 3. A few more days into it, Cunyer is showing signs of reform. In the mess hall, he hands Janeway a new essay titled IQ, An Insider's View of the Continuum. It's good, or at least passable, and he actually did the work himself. Icheb swings by to invite him to a piloting lesson with Tom, and Janeway grants him a break. He's earned it, and she probably wants some quiet. Out in the Delta Flyer, Cunyer is nervous. Mortality's got him spooked, and sudden warning beeps don't help. Icheb and Tom shrug off the alarm and give Cunyer a turn at the controls, and he nervously accepts. Later on Voyager, Janeway gives Q a glowing report. Cunyer even shows up with his essay and a rare moment of humility, crediting the Voyager crew with helping him see the Continuum as home. Q, unimpressed, reminds Janeway that the test wasn't about charm, it was about proving he deserves to be a Q again. Janeway says Q's moving the goalpost, and Cunyer, now back in his quarters, tells her that he doesn't care what his father thinks. Janeway offers to let him stay on Voyager, and she'll try to convince the Q to keep him human rather than turn him back into an amoeba. Cunyer says thanks, but he does still want his powers back and be a Q, just like his old man. Act 4. Cunyer ropes Icheb into repairing the problem that caused the alert from their earlier flight. Just a simple systems check, nothing suspicious. Until it is. Icheb suddenly finds himself locked inside the Delta Flyer as Cunyer fires it up and blocks Voyager's sensors. The plan? Slip through a spatial flexure and disappear before Dad shows up again. Despite Voyager's best effort to hold them, Cunyer blasts his way out of the shuttle bay with the Flyer's phasers. Icheb urges him to turn around and apologize, but Cunyer is determined. That is, until they cross paths with a Chokuzan vessel. Instead of negotiating, Cunyer fires because why not double down on bad decisions? Icheb is critically wounded in the melee. Cunyer rushes him back to Voyager, but the doctor can't treat him without knowing what weapon caused the injury. Q appears, and for one brief Q-typical moment, Cunyer tries to shift the blame. Janeway sets him straight. Q's response? No help. Actions have consequences, and Cunyer has just met his, even if it means his friend, Icheb, will die. Act 5. With Icheb clinging to life, Cunyer agrees to return with Janeway to Chokuzan space and confess everything. He needs to know what weapon was used before the doctor can treat his only friend. The Chokuzan captain agrees to share that information, but says there's a price. Janeway must be punished, since adults are responsible for their children. Cunyer steps up and takes the fall, even if it means execution. Q, laughter. Turns out the Chokuzan captain is Q in disguise, and the whole thing was a test. Not a science fair kind of test, but a test of character. And Cunyer passed. Self-sacrifice, genuine remorse, the whole 9 yards. Now it's time for the real judgment. The Continuum is less enthusiastic. The Q Tribunal rules that Cunyer hasn't made enough progress to regain his powers and must remain human. Q calls it outrageous, but they remind him that Cunyer caused the whole mess in the first place. The punishment stands, sort of. Later, Cunyer is sulking in Janeway's ready room, assuming that he'll never see his father again. But Q pops in, revealing he threatened to quit the Continuum altogether if they didn't give his kid a second chance. that worked. Q gets his powers back, his dad's admiration, and Janeway's ready room gets flooded with roses. As a thank you, Q hands Janeway a pad with intel to shave off a few years from their journey. And with that, poof, he's gone. The end.
So I know that this is usually audio, but I need to describe what I was doing while you were actually telling us, regaling us with your recap, which was unbelievably good.
Thanks, bud.
I was keeping score.
Okay.
I was keeping score, so I pulled out a notepad and a pencil, or pen. Yeah. And this is a very high score for you, John. Okay. We started off with, and this was one of my favorites, weaponized puberty.
I'm so glad you picked that up, because to me, that is the band name of the week.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Without fail.
Good.
And I've been watching Dom, one of our, friends at our Mission Log Discord, and he's actually been creating edited videos of our band names. So weaponized puberty, go. Dom
goes on the list
with that. Now, weaponized puberty would be, would be managed by, and because you said the last name, it sounded very similar to Fleckman, so it would be Bobby Fletcher would be managing the band.
Bobby Fletcher. Yes. I love that.
The next, well, obviously, major league points, and you held it together really well with every reference of Cunior. That was inspired, my friend.
See, here's the thing. It's like when you come up with a joke, the only thing to do is to just beat that joke into the ground.
Absolutely.
So that's I felt compelled to do that here. So thank you.
Q typical moment. Don't think that one got past me. Right?
Good.
And Q laughter. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Take a bow. Everyone applaud right now.
You got to. Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. That one was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So, I appreciate it. And weaponized puberty world, make of that what you will.
That might be in like the top 5 easily.
Oh, thank you.
Easily.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. I cannot wait to attend their first tour. So let's get into it. I'm really entertained by the opening here because I like Icheb's nervousness, but total earnestness as well. He's going to get through this report no matter what. And he studies history. He has this fascination with that 5-year mission period. And, I guess canonically then here it ends in 2270.
Mm-hmm.
So we know exactly when Kirk's 5-year mission ended. Yeah.
And it's nice that this is kind of like building on the previous episode when Icheb was talking to Seven about like these historical quotes that he's been memorizing. So I thought that was nice. So yes, definitely in the history vein. With all of these mentions of like the Captain Kirk like breaking the Prime Directive. So what was going on with kind of like the fans at the time saying, what? And the what? And these aliens? Like, that never happened on the TV show that I watched.
So I really thought, and believe me, as soon as I saw those names pop up on subtitles, on the closed captioning, I had to go look for those. It was like, what did I miss here? And no, we're not missing anything. I kind of like the fact that they just kept it vague and something that we have not seen before. I wish Star Trek were better at that. Just let us fill in the gaps. You don't need to hand us every single little detail. So, kind of fun. Love the entrance by Q, and then Q. Simple blocking tricks. Just move the camera, move the actor a little bit, and in that blank space, your other actor goes in. Really nicely done. And then a great rack focus when you see Q pop up on Kathy's desk.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's nice. Like, that's like great inset work, you know? Okay. So I'm going to quote this. I know he's grown since you last saw him, Kathy, but don't tell me you can't see the family resemblance. This is Q. My son, Q. All that.
Yeah.
Okay. So we know that John Delancey and Kate Mulgrew are friends.
Yeah.
And we know that they've worked together and they have great admiration for each other, et cetera, et cetera. We talked about that before. So there's a little bit of, there's like a lot of entendre going on, double, triple entendre going on with this. So you have that, you have, I don't know, maybe Kate's reaction to having Keegan on set with her was genuine.
Sure.
But it's a little telegraphed with the quote unquote nepotism.
Yeah.
So I don't know how people feel about that.
Well, so I was thinking about that, and I thought at the time, if you were seeing this in 2001 when it premiered, you probably caught the trailers that aired during the week leading up to the episode. But unlike today, you didn't have an IMDb to go to tell you every bit of information about a show before it airs.
Right.
And you would not have seen Keegan's name until you come back in Act 1. So you may have just been a little surprised, like, who is this young actor who they got to play this role? Wait, it's like he's doing a John Delancey thing here. And then only later do you clue in when those credits go by, which I don't even always read the first time I'm watching, because I'm watching the actors. But then they go by and you go, oh, wait a minute. I got the same last name.
Yeah.
But, and I think if I'm correct on this, Keegan would have been like 17 when they made this.
Looks
so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not a ton of acting experience.
Right.
But he had some, and certainly enough in professional enough shows. You do the thing. You have an agent, you go in for the reading, you do the job. Doesn't hurt that you had the resemblance. Right. And I'm sure that people in the room and people in the production thought, if this works, it'll be really cool.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. It had the same reaction when I watched a TV show years ago called Roswell. It was about based on the kind of like the high school drama series Roswell, New Mexico, and Colin Hanks was cast, and it was like maybe one of his first roles. And as soon as I saw him, I was like, the mannerisms are unmistakable. And that's how I felt when I saw Keegan. It was like the mannerisms, let alone like being able to see the credit name. His mannerisms were unmistakable.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Yeah, right at the beginning, the attitude, the interactions, they're all, they're playing off of each other well. And I don't know if it's just there naturally or the director is saying to Keegan, like, hey, do a little more of your father here.
Right. Understood.
Yeah.
I'm just going to try and get Cunior. I'm going to try and fit that into my notes.
Sure.
Because I can't.
Q2 that is my fun. Gift.
Cunior.
Yeah, Cunior is my gift.
Right. So Cunior, at the beginning, on the bridge, seems to slouch a lot. So I don't know if that was him, any kind of direction. It's just stand up straight, son. You're wearing a Starfleet uniform. Also, on timestamp 3 minutes, 34 seconds, is Cunior actually popping a piece of gum into his mouth?
I wondered that. I wasn't quite sure, but yeah, I thought it might have been. I love his description of bipeds pushing buttons. I think that's a good album name, so people can have that too.
Maybe it's a song name for weaponized puberty.
Probably, yeah. That the entire Voyager cast and crew, they had been waiting for 7 years to have the engineering rave,
right?
Because that was great. Actually, the music was pretty good too. Thought that was great.
Let's claim it right now. Club 47.
Yes.
Right.
Done.
Yep.
Done.
Let's get that going. Let's shelf Club Bro Med for vintage reasons.
For Club 47.
And now we have Club 47.
Cunior, he is an adolescent, but it's, kind of a cheap shot just to get Jerry out of her costume again. Now, look, I'll hand it to them. They didn't overplay it. I thought Jerry played it well, just completely solid, just this doesn't bother me, go away. Also, I thought from the back she should have had more Borg hardware. I thought that would have been cool, know?
Something in a spine.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that. Yeah, I was like, of course, we have done this ad nauseum. There was a reason why they cast Jerry, et cetera, et cetera. But I got to give the writers credit. I mean, it's not like they don't know who their audience is. So they definitely wrote this for that audience, right?
Yep.
And it's not that they left her off the hook. I mean, there was another reference later on, we'll get to it, where Cunior can't help himself.
Yeah. And we may come back to this in the final summation, what works, what doesn't work. But I think if you're going to do that scene, and again, I think Star Trek can do comedy. I think Star Trek can do kind of sexy. I think Star Trek can also talk about adolescent urges, and all of that is okay. All that is fair to talk about and comment on. Whether it was done correctly here or not, whether or not it would be done differently now, probably so. That's all fair discussion as well.
Adolescent Urge is also another track.
Also, yeah. Yep, exactly. Yeah. And possibly Kitchen Rat. I think that might be a good band name. It honestly took me by surprise when we first heard him say that. Wow. Also glad to see Cunyer using astrometrics the way it should be, which as a large screen TV.
I thought he was gaming. I was like, what are you doing?
I did too. I did too at first. And they were like, oh, no, this is real. Yeah. Very creepy makeup effect on Neelix with his mouth shut, shades of Twilight Zone.
Right. I was also thinking like Charlie X.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then again, there was like this whole thing with, hey, look, Q summoned the Borg. Where have we seen that? It's like the junior version of Q's original arc and some of the finer points of Q's storyline, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, that just makes sense. And naturally, he calls in the Borg because that's what you do. It kind of bookends the experiences a bit. Yeah.
Right. I don't want to tip my hand at what I'm maybe what I'll say later on in discussion, but it's kind of like there's so much going on. There's so much threat that's being built up. And it's kind of like, the snap's coming, right?
Yeah.
Know the snap's coming.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'll for what we do, I'll do my due diligence, but I know it's coming. So we'll see if it actually happens.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, and then the Continuum have a rule about not provoking the Borg, but why?
Right.
They're the Continuum. They introduced the Borg to us in the first place, and they could stop it if they wanted to.
I want to know, why that line was written, because it's the Q, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the only person so far that I've ever seen threaten Q ever in the history of Star Trek was Guinan with her kung fu hands.
Yeah, right.
That was
Guinan.
Right?
Yeah.
So, you want that version of Guinan in your action figures, the one with the kung fu grip. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Cut to Janeway's quarters. She's got a soaking tub. Do you replicate that up every time you need it? Or is it just there permanently? And then you got to run water to it somehow? I was very impressed with that.
Did Chakotay kind of like on the QT fill that for her?
He's like, hey, Catherine, stay out of your quarters for a couple of days. I'm working on something.
Project Akushimoya. What is this file, Akushimoya, in the replicator? Don't worry about that. Only my peoples know about that.
Yeah.
So Cunyer says to Seven, in mixed company, can I see you naked again? I'm like, did that need to be there?
Yeah. See, that's the part. That's the one that just felt.
It felt very, I know it's 2001, but it felt of the 90s.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I love the idea of the holodeck to run exercises in diplomacy. That is just like the most Star Trek on top of Star Trek thing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, not to jump the timeline too much, but that was very well employed in Prodigy.
Oh, hey, there we go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like seeing all the Alpha Quadrant, like the aliens again.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, oh yeah, it's kind of like this rogues gallery for Starfleet,
Yeah. Yeah. Really nice, very Huck Finn moment of Cunyer getting Icheb to write an essay for him.
Right.
You're so smart. Wow. Boy, I could learn so much from you. Why don't you do the work, Now, I do have to wonder, was Cunyer's solution in the holodeck, was that up there with Kirk rigging the Kobayashi Maru? Because he should be, commended for his ingenuity.
The conversation that Cunyer had with Janeway, and he's kind of, his chest was kind of puffed up.
Yeah.
But then deflated. And then he says, how do you save a race that's already omnipotent?
I love that line.
That was brilliant.
Yeah.
Like I was waiting for that to happen. And I'm wondering if this is just kind of like this philosophical Trek question. Can Q, or God in this case, create a boulder that Q can't even lift?
Yeah.
Right. Or create a riddle that Q can't even answer.
Yeah. Yeah. And that scene between Cunyer and Janeway is really strong. They're both good in it. And man, Janeway, at the end of that, right before you cut to commercial, she says, dismissed. Again, and look, I'm just watching it. I didn't do anything wrong, but I felt guilty
Oh, yeah.
The way she said it. That's just the way I am. Now, when in doubt, ever in Voyager, put Tuvok in some running gear and have him running through the corridors. He didn't have a lot to do in this episode, but I think that was a good use of him. Why not? We have a reference to Chell. I like that. I like calling back characters we haven't seen in a little while, and he must have done something very wrong to wind up scrubbing plasma conduits. So,
I'm surprised that he wasn't the Bolian, right?
Yeah. See, exactly. I thought we were going to see it. Yeah, I thought we were going to see him. Yeah, another really good camera trick with having Q appear in the lift. And then Janeway just closes the door right on him. It continues in the same shot to walk down the corridor, and then he reappears on the other side of the screen, seemingly just from out of a wall. It was great. That was well done. Well done, LeVar Burton.
Some of the dialogue, though, it was kind of like hit or miss for me, because there's a really good scene, and it's acted well. It's always acted well between, John Delancey and Kate. Q says the boy needs to demonstrate nothing less than exemplary Q-ness. And Jan was like, what is that? The whole thing is, what does that mean? And he's like, well, you can't possibly understand. Well, she can't understand it. If she has a minuscule mind, then why is he sending to her in the first place?
Right.
And this is what I was thinking.
Going to be qualified.
This is what I was thinking. The Q, basically, this is like the Q's version of, you're not a parent. If you're not a parent, you can't understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then why did you give me your baby to take care of in the first place?
Exactly.
Right?
Now we have the introduction of some nicknames, Itchy and Q Ball.
Yeah. I'd watch that show.
Yeah, it should be its own show. Okay, I like that. Then we go for a joyride in the Delta Flyer. And actually, I thought it was kind of funny making Icheb such a square through this whole thing.
Yeah.
Because we don't get much sense of his personality throughout, up until now. He's just kind of this guy, and he needs help, and he has this tragic backstory with his parents, and he is a walking biological weapon. But I like just really making him in contrast to Cunyer here.
Well, I think a really interesting balance is struck here. You have Icheb, who's, at the very beginning was set to be pursue this career as a Starfleet officer. It's so important to him. And he has to do that by earning that. And Cunyer kind of comes off as being Q privileged. You know what I mean?
Ooh,
I don't need to earn anything because I have daddy's power, right? That allows me to walk the halls with impunity.
Yeah.
Until I can't.
See?
Right?
Well said. We have a simple choice in the episode, death or amoeba.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
You got, if you know that, good for you.
Yeah. But I did wonder, do you have your full consciousness as an amoeba? Because what's the implication there? Is this like everything that you know as a Q, all your other experience stays with you? You're just an amoeba? Something about it didn't quite make sense to me.
I dig Death or Amoeba, though, as another track for
that's good
puberty.
Death or Amoeba. Yeah. Not a joke, a test. I think we'll come back to that because I think that's one of the ethical questions here in this episode. Yeah.
Yeah. I was waiting I know that, there's this villain and he's like, well, no, hey, look, it's me. And I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for that meddling Cunyer.
Yeah.
Right. And EHS or Itchy and Scratchy or whoever they themselves.
It was a bit like that. I did wonder, do all the Q get to be on the tribunal at some point? Like, do they all have that judge's robe and hat in their wardrobe and they're just waiting for the moment that they all get to do it?
Here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking Q is like the Great Link, right? They're individual and the link at the same time. So are the robes Q?
Oh.
So every time they do something, it's like, okay, so take them out of the continuum. They just choose to look something else. And then when you're out of the continuum, you're back in there and you're back in the queue. That's what you look like.
Yeah.
Right.
That's good. That's a good question. Something that I thought was an interesting idea that totally doesn't matter in the end. But if Q has eternal custody of Cunyer, doesn't the boy grow up at some point? But because they play very fast and loose. It's been 4 years, but he's a teenager. He's an older teenager. And remember, he's gone for 10 minutes in Janeway time, which is years in Q time, but he's still the same 17-year-old Junior when we encounter him again shortly thereafter. So I don't know, like, do we have to wait thousands and thousands of years for him to grow out of having to be mentored and chaperoned by Q?
John, your minuscule mind can't understand.
I can't comprehend it. You're right. You're right. Yeah.
Hey, look, going all the way back to my original prediction, snap, all's well that ends well, and Thanos is a punk compared to the Q.
We'll get right back to Q2 after a quick reminder about the Mission Log Listener Survey.
Hey, Mission Log listeners, this is it. We're down to the wire. The Roddenberry Podcast Listener Survey closes October 10th, and if you haven't filled it out yet, now's the time.
This is your chance to shape what's next for Mission Log as we prepare to head into Enterprise and grow Roddenberry Podcast. We want to hear your feedback on the shows, Discord, on our YouTube plans, all of it.
And yes, we're saying thank you in style. When you complete the survey, you'll get a secret code that unlocks your entry into our giveaway for a TOS film cell plaque, an actual 35mm frame from the cutting room floor. No two are alike.
Now, these are rare, limited edition collectibles, and multiple winners will be taking one home. It's like owning a literal frame of Star Trek history.
The survey takes just a few minutes. The link is in the show notes. And again, the deadline is October 10th.
And hey, while you're at it, if you want even more ways to stay involved, our Patreon community is always growing. That gets you into our private Discord where the conversation is thoughtful, welcoming, very often hilarious.
So complete the survey, enter to win, and help guide the next 5-year mission. That link again is right there in the notes.
Let us know what you think, and good luck.
When all the judges are lined up, it definitely seems like there's suddenly a lot of Q in the D.
Is this Charlie X? Because this feels like Charlie X. And look, I don't mean that in a bad way. You mentioned it a moment ago very specifically with the scene from Charlie X of the woman crew member with her face kind of matted out, and that is a creepy, indelible image.
You know, in Nicolas Cage's and John Travolta's face, like, they took her face.
They took her face
off. And scene. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautifully acted. I wondered if Ken Biller had that in mind when he said, hey, let's do this story about, what happens after the Q Continuum have this new child. Did he think like, if he's adolescent, then we'll also be able to do this kind of parallel story? Because I think they tipped their hat a little bit by having all the references to Kirk in there in the beginning.
Right.
But I also wondered, maybe did Ken Biller just pitch, this is a story worth following up on, and we can have Q Jr. in here. And was it Robert Doherty who said, but wait, we can also do these things that very clearly parallel Charlie X? Or is it just you tell a story about a rambunctious teen and that's what you get?
You know, the interesting thing about this is that in Star Trek, I think that references like this have to be really carefully considered because there will always be references to a story like this and how it compares to Charlie X. Because Charlie X, back in like 1966.
It was early. Yeah.
So this was, an allegorical story about the problems of a young man not fitting into society, not fitting in with authority, not fitting in sexually, not fitting in just socially, and lashing out. And if you actually had the power to manifest what you want to lash out with and how to punish people who are supposedly doing you wrong, you could. Hence what happened with that woman with, what happened to her face, or Charlie, like, pinching.
Rand. Yeah.
And, and then, of course, you have to have, the male figure teaching you how to pratfall in pink tights, because obviously that's very masculine. So, I mean, all kidding aside, again, bringing the Kirk reference in here,
Yeah.
you have that pairing up. Now, I think that's a really interesting dynamic, having Janeway, the quote unquote stronger, more maternal, obviously iconic role in Voyager.
Right. Well,
With this dynamic.
And that's what I'm getting at, because I think it's interesting here that Janeway is in the Kirk role. And if anybody who doesn't remember Charlie X, you have an adolescent boy who is a being with, the famous trademark, copyright registered godlike powers that we get very often in Star Trek, right?
Right.
And whether it's in Charlie X or here, it's this exploration of the right kind of balance between empathy, understanding, and discipline when it comes to not just raising a child, but, getting through to somebody who's a bit troubled, somebody who
I love that you led with empathy. That's very important.
Think about it. I think it really is, because that's what Q doesn't have. That's also what, I forget if we even had a name of what species Charlie was from, but they lack that as well. They just kind of kicked him out there, and he's picked up by the Enterprise. Well, he's dumped on the Enterprise from the
Antares?
The Antares, yeah, that trading vessel, the cargo vessel, right? He's too much trouble. We can't deal with him here. He's yours. And there's no attempt to understand. There's no attempt to sort of get him on his level. And even Kirk, in that scene where he pinches Rand, Kirk is able to say, like, that's wrong. You don't do that. But let me talk to you. Let me at least talk to you on a level that I understand you, that you have these feelings and you don't know what to do with them. And we're going to try to find a little more positive and constructive ways for you to grow, for you to, become a responsible adult. And that's the same thing going on here. And it takes Janeway. It takes Janeway laying down the discipline as well, but it takes her understanding. Think about those scenes of some real tenderness, of her saying, like, hey, whatever they do to you, I've got you. Yeah, I've got your back. I'm here for you. You can have asylum on this ship. I think there's some beautiful moments.
But here's the thing with Q. Like, when it came to Charlie X, or pretty much any story pre-Q, or maybe even pre-Trelane, because, there is an association that is being made, and it was made earlier on with Peter David's book.
Yeah.
That... At least we didn't know who Charlie X was. You're right. You were dealing with this.
But we don't know the species. But you could, in your headcanon, you could say, oh, yeah, he's from the Continuum. Or,
sure. Yeah. Or any of the, you had the Melkotians, from Errand of Mercy, you had the Organian Treaty, the
Organians, yeah.
All of that stuff. And, of course, Gene projected that as, okay, with these godlike beings, they're not godlike. They're just, we can't understand. So we try and connect with him at a human level, right? And that's what Turk tried to do. He tried to be the maternal figure at a human level to Charlie. So how do you reconcile a Q-like being now, knowing everything we've known about what Q has experienced through Picard, through the Next Generation, through Deep Space Nine, now in Voyager, even in Voyager itself, because you had the Q in the Gray, and then you had the one where he tried to fall in love with Janeway. You have all of that. Take all of that into consideration. And if he hasn't learned anything from it, and he's supposed to impart that wisdom into the Continuum, then how's his child going to learn anything from it? Because once he has his powers back, like I said, snap, no harm, no foul, we're off to the next episode. So what we needed was a really true scared straight moment where, like with the episode where that one Q wanted to kill himself, he wanted to suffer real mortal death. That's fascinating because he decides that consequence for himself.
Yeah.
To learn.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But if you are endowed with and protected by quote unquote Q privilege, right? Then, like in a scared straight program, once you leave the penitentiary, you can go back to being nefarious without an issue. right?
Yeah.
Unless you actually stay locked up in the penitentiary and suffer what those prisoners are threatening them with in the Scared Straight program.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So everything that Cunyer learns, does he really learn anything?
Well, okay. Yeah. And I think that's an interesting way that this episode toys with that idea. The Q are not known for their humility. They're not known for their ability to learn and I would say, well, meet humanity on their level. You know, they always play the superior card, and at least that's all the Q that we have met so far. So this test that Q gives to Cunyer, first of all, I question whether the whole premise was fair at all, because ultimately it's not about the lesson. Maybe you can say that Cunyer learned something here, or is he just emotionally compromised by what's going on, and he's desperate to make things right enough that he doesn't have the worst possible fate? Or is death by this alien species a better fate than being an amoeba? So he's faced with these, terrible outcomes either way. You ask yourself, okay, does the Scared Straight program actually work? Does it just control the behavior as opposed to imparting the lesson, the underlying importance of the lesson, which needs to be the bedrock of his future development,
And this is where I brought up my personal issue with whether or not it was nepotism, or whether or not that they couldn't find an actor that would have maybe given us a different performance. Because what I do think a problem is when you're watching this episode is you're waiting for Keegan to become John. Right? Mm-hmm. And there is something that it causes I think for me at least, a very significant disconnect when you're watching these two performances. We know, it's almost as if John Delancey is Q played almost like organic. He is Q. It's not like John Delancey and Q are different.
Yeah, no, he slips right into that. Yeah.
Right into that. Yeah. And you're expecting him to say certain things. Let's take the reaction when Cunyer said rat. What did he say? Kitchen
rat. Yeah. Carlson Neelix.
Now when John Delancey says it, it is dripping with venom.
Yeah.
Whether he meant it or not, you can hear it come out. It drips with that kind of insincerity, that irreverence, that just meanness that Q has sometimes.
Yeah. And he does, he calls Neelix Janeway's Talaxian pet.
Right. But when he says it, it sounds so much more extra than, say, when Keegan says it.
Yeah. But is that fair when you've got a teenager? Here's this thing that teenagers do. They play with language. They use, curse words and insults and stuff to kind of test out what those boundaries are and see if they can easily and naturally fit that into the way that they talk, because they realize that language is power in that respect. I get somebody's attention by using the insult, or you think I'm tough because I used this word or this insult or something, as opposed to the naturalness that a grown-up Q might do that.
Well, I mean, okay, so again, this is that disconnect of, I get that from a human kid standpoint, maybe even Icheb's standpoint. But a Q with power, why would they care?
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
so the thing is, humanizing the Q has always been a very tricky situation for me, because after a few instances, with Q on, TNG, and of course, Tapestry is amazing. All Good Things is amazing. I get that, right? But now when you have like a John Delancey show up in Deep Space Nine, it's not significant to the arc of the characters. He just shows up because he's a fan favorite. And now he does here. Yep. There's no real consequence for building a Q arc in this. And if there's no consequence for him here, then why would there be any consequence for his son?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. And that's the tricky thing here, is because you have to build the consequence into the Q continuum, which we don't know anything about.
Yes, absolutely. Absa 100%. Yeah. And it would have been really interesting if the Q continuum judges at the end did something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? They had the robes and stuff. They were literally putting Q on trial. It goes, and that screams, and I think it's a great, detail. It screams all the way back to Encounter at Farpoint. When Q put Picard and, he put him on trial for humanity. Yeah. Why not put Q Jr. on trial for being human? To be human.
Interesting.
Right? And then have them snap their fingers because Q, the father, has no authority over the continuum.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. Interesting stuff here. Yeah, by the way, speaking of Q's greatest insults, because, calling Neelix Talaxian pet, there's this great line here, which is thoughtful and true. Q says to Janeway, "We both know you're a million times the parent I am." And Janeway says, "I'm not a parent." And then Q says...
That's parent.
Yeah, but well, maybe not in a biological sense, but you're certainly a mommy to this crew. Just look at how quickly you housebroke that Borg. Which is awful, but great. I mean, only a Q can get away with saying that.
But John Delancey's Q.
Only John Delancey's Q. Yeah. But here's the thing. I also, when he said that right before we got to that line about housebreaking the Borg, I thought about Harry, as I thought about Janeway being the mother figure, the maternal character on this show, and honestly caring for this crew in that way. And of course, it makes sense for her to be the aunt who then reluctantly, pushed into the situation of trying to be a parent, but would actually be a good one. Because
you don't mess with ants. Aunties
you don't.
Ooh, they are fierce.
Yeah.
Right.
But she would be a good one because she's got this great combination of command and discipline, but also a feeling for the emotional lives of her crew. She did push back about the Borg line, but not about the insult. She only pushed back that it took her years to get there. Yeah.
But at the same time, I think we've all kind of recognized, and maybe in a way the crew does recognize as well, that Seven and Annika are in this adolescent phase of her life, and Naomi too. So that would have been interesting if Naomi popped in. It's because she's the younger, she's one of the youngest.
Why are we missing Naomi here?
That is the question all the time.
Huge oversight. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because that's where Janeway kind of learns her parenting skills. She doesn't have, she never had her own biological children, at least on what we've seen, but she has Naomi. Of course, where's Samantha Wildman? I guess that's the other question, right?
Yeah.
But there is always this wonderful opportunity to compare Janeway's maternal instincts as a leader of this ship versus, say, the maternal characters from previous shows. She's a better parent than most.
Yeah, right? Yeah, for real. Well, because look, we have a lot of bad. I think that was a note to myself here. Q as a father, worse than Worf, better than Worf, worse than Sarek, better than Sarek. At least I got to hand it to Q. He is involved here. He's trying to give up the responsibility. He's trying to get anybody to lend him an extra hand here that he can, but he's actually concerned. He actually cares about this outcome as opposed to son, what son? I don't have a son. Yeah. So
I wish Amanda Rogers came back. Oh, was it Amanda Rogers?
Yeah.
Olivia DeBeau?
Olivia. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would have been a great return here as well.
I mean, we need to see all of these other splintered kind of factions of Q to come in and weigh in. Imagine if these were the judges on that council for this really interesting cameo appearance and say no. The reason why this is important and the reason why you have to embrace your humanity is because this is the reason why we sent Q to champion him, not to, condemn humanity in the first place and judge them. And look at what he's learned.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So we get Olivia back. We get Corbin Burnson back.
Absolutely. Yeah. We can get Frakes because Frakes was given the power of Q.
He was given the power of Q. Exactly.
Right. So
we just rewrote it.
Driving tests are hard enough. There's really no need to do that with asteroids around.
Look, we didn't even have to snap our fingers once to get us to this, to get us to the end, get us to the conclusion here of the show. Yeah, we don't need the power of the Q to talk about the Q. We're going to wrap it up here as we finish up Q2. So as you know, at the end of the show, we get to ask, does the episode hold up? What did we learn? Did we, like Cunior here, learn something at the end of the day? Or did Cunior learn something at the end of the day? So Norman, Q2, does the episode hold up? What do you think?
Okay, so I am reading my notes as I wrote them because we watch these episodes, a few times to make sure that we get the deepest meaning. But the great thing about doing Mission Log as a podcast is that even if you believe that you got the meaning that you think you got after conversation and after really looking at all the pieces, you may have shifted a little bit in your position.
That's my favorite thing. I love changing my mind after we talk. Yeah. So
in reading my notes, I'm going to read what I originally wrote.
Okay.
And then I'm going to tell you how I exactly feel right now.
Okay.
So I said, yeah, I'll be honest. Ever since The Next Generation, I have not been the biggest Q fan in the world. Not a John Delancey fan. I love John Delancey. But just the whole idea of Q, to me, I think is overdone. I think characters with that uncapped power level, I find them being just really kind of boring to watch because there are no consequences to that character.
It's kind of like going back to the well with the mirror universe.
Sure.
I feel like you can do it once and you can tell your story and just leave it at that. But if you keep coming back to it over and over again, it removes the power, or it just poses too many questions that you can't answer or can't thoroughly explore as a show. But sorry to interrupt.
No. I mean, that's fine. And with what I wrote, I said I was bored, but worse, I was unengaged, not disengaged, unengaged and disconnected. But our conversation has shifted me from that a little bit.
Okay.
Because my issue with the episode doesn't come from the episode. My issue with the episode comes from how I feel about the Q uncapped power.
Yeah.
And how it's easy to write characters when they are godlike and can do whatever they want ad nauseum, at will, however you want to describe it.
Yeah.
Because when you do that, as we discussed this, earlier, you don't have to worry about consequence. And if you don't have consequences, then you don't learn. And if you don't learn, then why are you even doing this story?
Right.
Right. So did we? I guess the big question, it's kind of like, let's rephrase what Kirk did to the God figure in Star Trek V, when Kirk asked the God figure, what does God need with a starship? Well, here's the question. What does Q need with a sun?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because omnipotence, to me, as a narrative tool, it leads to boredom. If you're an omnipotent character, the reason why you're doing certain things is because you're bored. It's like the gods of Mount Olympus. The reason why they treated mortals so badly is because they were bored.
Yeah.
Right? And we can't obviously do anything to each other. We're gods. So what are we going to do? Well, it's kind of like, what are you going to do to an anthill? Well, you're going to step on it.
Yeah.
Right? The ants didn't do anything wrong. You just want to see what happens when the ants react. Right?
Yeah.
Is that learning anything? No. If you get bit, you're just going to do it again. You're just going to put on a shoe or a tougher shoe or get, some type of killer. It's like, that doesn't teach you anything. That's what I needed more of. And I needed that tribunal to teach Cunior something, right? And to validate Janeway's investment and involvement with the character. Why am I going to teach this kid anything? What's he going to learn? Right? Is that the frustration with parents? Maybe this is the angle that I haven't seen. When you spend so much time raising your children and believing that you've done right, if they go off and do something independently, does that mean you actually did it wrong? Or are they doing what they believe is right for themselves? Themselves. So, is it bad? No, it's not as bad as I made it out to be. Is it Threshold? No, because there's nothing like Threshold, right? And I said this, I have to read this because I wrote this. I said, Threshold was by comparison Milos Forman's Amadeus to Falco's Walk Me Amadeus.
Okay.
Right? As much as I love the song,
Yeah.
there isn't any lesson that I learned from that song, but Amadeus is rife with mortal consequences.
Yeah.
Is it a bad episode? No. Is it a harmless episode? Yes. It's charming. It's comfort food, right? We all understand comfort food. Let me use this last analogy. Comfort food is great. Comfort food Trek is great. Reheated leftovers from Q's earlier appearances, sure, maybe they're fun.
Yeah.
And as much as I love leftovers, though, you can't call reheated leftovers a 1-star Michelin meal.
Right.
I think this episode had the potential for that because we're in basically the last 8 episodes to the finale of Voyager. And by comparison, look what Deep Space Nine did in their last 8 episodes.
Yeah.
Versus now. And again, we are not decades apart. We're literally years apart between when Deep Space Nine ended and when Voyager's going to end. Season 7 has been so good. Just right the ship and get back to the journey.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
That's what we want. Right?
All right. Well said. And okay, it's so funny that, yes, we do not read each other's notes. And I used the same phrase that you did in my notes, which was comfort food. Because I asked myself, well, do we need this episode? No, not really. Am I glad to see Q again? Sure. I mean, maybe because Q is fun. John Delancey is fun. It's a fan favorite character. But do I need Q again here? And I think that answer is no. It's intriguing. It's an interesting idea to follow up on this very unique solution that they had back in the Q and the Gray. The fact that Voyager would follow up on something from 4 years ago, great. I'm glad that we have that. But does it need to fall right here, right now, in the home stretch before we get to the finale?
May I add something here since you brought her Q and the Gray? Why didn't they not bring in Susie Plaxton in some way?
Oh, yeah, because they blew that off with one line. It just said like, his mother has disowned him. Okay, and then that's it.
Yeah.
That's not good enough. Yeah. I do think in some strange way, if I can defeat my own argument, or at least counter my own argument a little bit here, I think it comes at a good time in the respect that here was this kind of dangling potential story thread, and we do get to follow it up, and we do get to kind of like have the family reunion, literally and figuratively, before we wrap up Voyager. Not only is it the last time we're going to see Q in Voyager, it's the last time we're going to see Q on Star Trek. At least for a very, very long time when conditions are extremely different, So in that respect, just to say goodbye to a beloved character, okay, we do it here, and we do it with a somewhat fresh spin on it. And the other, look, I think Keegan does a very good job. John Delancey always does a great job. We play with, we've talked about Charlie X quite a bit. We play with that dynamic a bit. There's a Twilight Zone aspect to this. Every time you do a story about a juvenile delinquent who just needs to be loved and understood and disciplined a bit, that's pretty classic in storytelling anyway. And then giving that kid enormous godlike power, that's a pretty classic sci-fi spin on that already classic story. So I'm okay with treading some familiar ground here.
Is this a hat on a hat, as you usually say?
It is a little bit of a hat on a hat, but I think the thing that saves it is this. So, and I say this a lot on our show, that ultimately the guest stars are here in service of the main cast. And for all the rockiness that we've had with Janeway, when you kind of get bogged down with season 4 and 5 and early 6 Janeway making very questionable moral, ethical decisions, right? We've had Janeway back on some great ground recently. Her earnestness in the void, saying, we're putting a Federation back together here because that's the way to do this. I love seeing that part of her. And I love seeing this aspect of Janeway on display again because it's the Janeway that we've needed all along when it comes to Harry, Seven, Naomi, Icheb, those twins who don't talk, anybody else who needs this kind of figure. And it's a great balance. It's a great way to really drive home who Janeway is, that she is equally capable of being a strong commander who makes hard decisions, but is also somebody who empathetically understands and cares about her crew.
That's why she was so good with Kes. This, I will always say.
Yes, of course. Of course. Yeah. So, looking at this story that way, how does it serve our main characters who we care about? I actually think it's quite good. Like you, I've got a bit of that burnout. Like, what more do you do with an omnipotent character? What more do you do with a character for whom there are no rules? So should we really care at the end what the Q tribunal says? Not my circus, not my monkeys. But I do care because I care that Janeway cares. And I like the look at her psychology through this episode. Mm-hmm. So is it top 10? Probably not. But does it serve a purpose here? Yeah, I think it does. And if you really held me to it, 50-50, does it hold up? Does it not? Maybe I give it 51% that it does hold up because of what it does for the others here.
I give it 47% myself.
See, that's the way to do it. That's the way to do it. And with that 4-point discrepancy, where do we find that we land on morals, meanings, and messages? I mean, look, I think this episode is pretty on the nose. It does it all in a fun, entertaining way. But Q, again, I ask you, how bad of a father is he on a scale of Worf to Sarek to who is James Kirk's father? We don't even know. Yeah, there's so much. There's so much.
Are you talking about George Kirk?
Yeah, George. There we go. Of course. Yeah. But that's 2009. We haven't even gotten to that yet.
Oh, right.
But, right. Actually, to a guy like Sisko, we have seen a good father there, and to a guy like Rom, pretty good father there. Q's problem is that the problem is more about the continuum than Q himself, or Q themselves, or Q-near himself. Q is perfectly willing to just set up this impossible standard and then give up when he doesn't get his way, and then make it somebody else's problem.
Yeah.
To his credit, he does drop in. He's trying to learn, but he's also trying to get the quick fix. And look, I'm not a parent. You're not a parent except to those adorable bunnies behind you. Mm-hmm. So there is a part of this that I think that people who are parents, it may resonate a bit better with. But even if I don't have that capacity in the real world, I do appreciate this story that says to parents, hey, it's not easy. And even if you don't have the power of a Q, yet especially if you don't have the power of a Q, because even if you did have the power of the Q, it still wouldn't be easy. But at the end of the day, the way that Kirk did with Charlie, the way that Janeway does here with Q-near, you've got to get on their level. You got to meet them emotionally where they are. You can actually impart some good lessons. And what we hope happens in this episode is what we hope happens all around, which is that the test actually resonates, and he passes that test because of the good influence of that positive adult presence in his life, who is Janeway, not Q, obviously, in this case. Yeah. So I think there is something nice here. Norman, how about you? What did you pick up?
Well, it's pretty much the same. I think that there is also a lesson to be learned about, probably one of the greatest science fiction, fantasy, comic book, pop culture tropes or, phrases probably written since the creation of Spider-Man. And that was when Uncle Ben said to Peter, with great power comes great responsibility. Mm-hmm. That is a great lesson to learn. Charlie X's power. He's taught that level of responsibility by Kirk, or at least Kirk tried to. And you have all of these examples, throughout Star Trek of these very powerful beings, at least when they encounter, our crew, depending on whichever, series that you're watching, there is a dialogue about that, about, I know you're powerful, but this is not the right thing to do with this power based on our morality, based on what we consider a moral center.
Mm-hmm.
The issue with this episode, and the issue with the Q, is that every single time we think we're making progress with them as a narrative arc, we're not. And this is where the issue lies for me with introducing a new Q, especially Delancey's child. And I'm using that in terms of the in-universe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When the Q asks for help, are they actually asking for help? Or what are they actually asking for? Because Jinli wants to do the right thing. Chakotay wants to do the right thing. All these characters want to do the right thing because that's why you're there. That's why Q brings his son to Janeway.
Yeah.
But the thing is in the real world, in the moral world that we live in, unless you have a certain amount of Q privilege, you have to face the consequences. Right?
Right.
And without understanding what those really mean, you learn nothing because you know that privilege will protect you.
Well, that's interesting, though, because, and I hate to belabor the point too much here and interrupt you, but I wonder then if that's part of the problem with this story, which is, in the end, hey, if you're human, wow, you really learn these important things about sacrifice and friendship and doing what's right because of the moral principle here. So as a human, you got to experience that and learn it and really take it to heart. But guess what? Snap my fingers, you're no longer human. I guess we all get to go home now.
Well, that's why I mentioned the whole scared straight thing. Like once you are protected again by that bubble of influence, or privilege, how does any of what you have learned in that real time, especially in Junior's real time of being human, how does that stick? Right? Yeah. Because all of a sudden when you snap and I'm back to full power again, I'm just going to go to another section of the cosmos and change the galactic history of some world because, you know what? It's Tuesday.
Yeah.
This is what we do on Tuesday. So I think the lesson is there. I just don't think the execution was. And for me, that kind of does go against the grain of what Star Trek is. You want to be in that moment where you're like, wow, I learned something. And so did the characters. That's the connection. If the character doesn't learn anything, then we don't learn anything.
Yeah, I mean, the Q have very rarely shown themselves to be self-sacrificial or care about kind of a greater moral principle beyond just the extent of their power. So at this point, do they look at this experience of humanity as being a kind of a superior experience to have because there is a value in humanity, there is a value in that kind of care and friendship and self-sacrifice, etc.? Or is that a burden that then they can easily shake off? Because if it is, why go through the experience anyway? Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, author.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Matt Esposito, Tom Kozak, Mike Richards, Mike Schabel, and Paul Shadwell. I'm just glad we got through that without any miscues. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.